In this life, who is talking to who around you and who is not talking to who is terribly important in your own personal life, but even more so in politics. Because currently in our political situation in the country, we have some very strange bedfellows talking to each other. Surely that must mean something. Surely that speaks volumes and has a lot to tell us about politics going forward. Now don't worry if you don't totally understand what I'm talking about. Okay? By the end of my show today, I assure you we will all be on the same page, and you will say to yourself, yeah. I guarantee you that. Welcome to my very super fascinating show today, which is a little different, but I hope will be thoroughly entertaining for all of us political animals out there. If for nothing else, especially because towards the end, I will take you right inside State House, Nairobi, to a very sensitive, confidential, highly classified meeting that took place, that got somebody fired, but in the end that somebody was proved 100%, 1000% correct in what they had said. That was the main reason that led to them being fired. Requirements for today's show: a lot of bobcorn, okay, and your favorite beverage. And don't put your thinking cap too far away. Twende kazi. There is a very famous quote I'm sure you've heard. Keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. Do you know where that phrase originally came from? I will tell you in a moment. But today, I want to add another line. And it is especially because of their relationship, your enemies that is, especially because of their relationship with those close to you. Okay? And so, the complete gem of wisdom is keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer, especially because of the relationship they have with those close to you. Okay? And this is something that is very helpful in this life. We live and save your life. I'm not kidding. And it is especially important in politics. And even for those of us who analyze politics. Extremely important. Now, older members of this channel will be aware that during the years of my political lectures, there were 3 books, you can call them textbooks, that my political lecturer always referred to. Julius Caesar, that classic play by William Shakespeare. Tom Mboya, The Man Kenya Wanted to Forget, by Professor David Goldsworthy. And a best-selling novel titled The Godfather. And I was confirming before I came in to make this recording, all 3 of them highlight, underline what my show is about today. Something very important. In fact, in current political alignments, in current politics, it will be impossible for anybody to understand unless they get this thing. we're going to talk about. And don't worry, I'm not giving any lectures today. Just exciting stories. Drama tupu. Because I'm sure you know, mahali kuna drama nyingi, ni ngumu kusahau. Oh yes. Keep your friends close. Doesn't make sense. They're your friends. You should trust them. And keep your enemies even closer. How do you do that? How do you keep your enemies close? Especially because of the relationship your enemies have with those who are close to you. Had Julius Caesar followed this very important piece of advice, he'd still be alive today. Oops, of course that is not true, but I'm sure you get the point. Did you know that the whole plot, kumaliza Caesar, started with somebody who had always hated him, a man called Cassius. He had a grudge against Caesar. He could not stand Caesar. He always hated Caesar with everything he had. Clearly, he was an enemy to Julius, and therefore he was kept ukombali, at a distance. But I don't know if you're aware that Cassius was married to the sister of Brutus, who was very close to Caesar, very close. He was a relative, and sometimes we strike it off with relatives who come into our lives a bit late. That is true. And so, Cassius and Brutus were talking, and they were pretty close. Na hapo ndo mambo ya Caesar ilianza kuharibika. Because to cut a long story short, Cassius convinced Brutus to put aside his feelings for Caesar and be patriotic and help get rid of his best friend, Julius Caesar. And that is exactly what happened. Keep your friends close, but keep your enemies even closer. Let's move very quickly to the other textbook, The Godfather, the novel. And this one is fascinating. Now, the Godfather's firstborn son was called Sonny Corleone, a very hot-headed guy, full of emotions. He was led in everything by emotions. Okay, and of course we know Hasara. He had a crazy temper. And this is how he was assassinated. His brother-in-law, yes, the guy married to his sister. His name was Carlo Rizzi. Huyo ndo alimseti. Is the one who led him to a trap that ended his life. You see, Sonny Corleone's sister, her name was Connie, was very deeply in love with this man called Carlo Rizzi. But they used to fight all the time. And Sonny Corleone was very predictable. Every time he saw marks on the face of his dear sister, clearly indicating that amenyoroshwa by the husband, he would immediately pay the man a visit and deal with him on the spot, an eye for an eye. And this was done in public with witnesses. People would see, so people would have the information. You know, even spiritually, if you want to finish a man, you finish his firstborn, his strength. And so this Bazzini family wanted to deal with the Godfather. Finish him. And so Sonny was on their hit list. You can guess what they did so easily. Sonny got a call. Your sister has been nyoroshod once again by the husband. His reaction was predictable. Despite the fact that he knew very well that there was a war going on, he took off immediately without enough security. Of course, it was Sonny's brother-in-law, Carlo Rizzi, who set that trap. He had got somebody to call Sonny. The objective was to draw him out of his security and finish him. And it worked like a charm. You know, I only understood why The Godfather was in my list of books long after my political lecture had left this planet. Today, I fully get it. Those days, I never really understood. You see, human relationships are very important in politics. Human relationships are very important in this life. Because you may have the best plans, you may have the best strategy, you may have the best everything. You may be very smart, very clever. But the weak link is always going to be human nature. Oh yes. Now of course in The Godfather, the Corleone family finally managed to avenge the very brutal killing of their firstborn, Sonny Corleone. But guess how Connie reacted? She was very angry against her own family. You people have made me a widow. Are you happy now? She was mad. Of course she had forgotten that the very same man, her husband, had also made somebody else a widow. Earlier, she completely forgot that. And human emotions kicked in. What? So, how does that apply to our current politics? Simple, brief answer. What if I told you that President William Samoei Ruto is talking to one of your big heroes in the opposition? And not only talking, they're very close. Hey, Chris, get out of here. Hiyo ni story ya jaba. Really? In my humble opinion, what you should be more concerned about is why and what is the link between the two. What has changed recently in that link between the two? Those are the questions you should ask. Now let us go deep into State House and attend a highly classified meeting. Oh yes. And while I may not be able to give you the exact time, I will give you the exact date. And I will also give you the dates of events leading to this highly classified meeting. Are you ready? Now on December 3rd, 1991, the then President Daniel Toroitich arap Moi called for a special KANU delegates conference where he dropped a bombshell. He stood up and told the delegates, and indeed the nation, that Kenya was going back into a multi-party democracy. Huh? Kenyans were shocked because barely a handful of weeks ago, Moi had said something to the effect that Kenya would only go into multi-party democracy over his dead body. Oh yes. Now here was Moi saying that the country was returning to multi-party politics. You know, Winston Churchill once said that no politician had ever suffered indigestion, yani shida ya tumbo, from eating their own words. Very true. And so on Saturday, 7th December 1991, there was a very high-level, classified meeting deep inside State House, Nairobi. It was only attended by those Moi trusted the most, including the country's spy chief, James Kanyotu. The agenda of that meeting was simple: how to deal with opposition. Now, isn't this very relevant even today? Is it or is it not? Anyway, that was the agenda. And as he usually did in these meetings, Moi initially sat quietly and listened to people talking and talking and talking about how KANU would need a lot of money to deal with this crisis, and about how KANU were in trouble because the whole country was supporting the opposition, and especially Murema, which Moi was terrified about. Moi and Murema? Moi was always terribly terrified. Yeah, and that's not breaking news. Everybody knows that. And then as usual, when it had started getting boring, Moi cleared his throat. And as usual, I'm very reliably informed, He started by telling off everybody at the meeting, yeah, and telling them there was a lot of nonsense they had been talking, which was not going to help Kanu. He told them not to worry about money. That one was not an issue. They would raise enough money, more than enough money, to deal with the opposition. His problem was politicians from Murema, and especially a man called Emilio Stanley Moi Kibaki. Moi, of course, was aware that Matiba was in very poor health. And of course, Moi reminded everybody present how experienced he was in politics and how he knew so many things they had no idea about. And he asked them whether they knew the plans of a man called Moi Kibaki. Because according to him, it was important that Moi Kibaki remains in Kano because he was a respected politician in the Murema area, capable of convincing very many people in the region to stay with Kano, yeah, if the region felt they had something to gain from Kano in the near future. And then Moi looked directly at Saitoti, who was at that meeting, and Moi said in Saitoti's face that he was even prepared, Moi that is, to drop his current vice president and replace him with somebody from Murema, if that is what it was going to take to save Kanu from the opposition. And then he turned directly to his spy chief, James Kanyutu, and asked him to speak. Now, James Kanyutu was many things, but that man was sharp. He was smart. Kanyutu told Moi that so far, from his network and his sources, he had not received any information of Kibaki planning to leave Kano for the opposition. And then after a very long pause, where Kanyutu appeared to be thinking very deeply, Kanyutu said something that shocked the whole meeting, including Moi. He said that in case Kibaki left Kano and joined the opposition, that would be the best thing ever for Kano. Why? Because it would definitely divide the Murema vote and thus make things much easier for Kano. Moi didn't take that lying down. He lost it. Moi made it clear that he strongly disagreed with that view, and that in his view, Kibaki was key in keeping Murema within Kano. It was very important, very critical, that Mwai Kibaki remains in Kano. I think we also need to add that Bwana James Kanyutu was also a very brave man, okay, for obvious reasons. Now, a few days later, before the Christmas holidays, Bwana James Kanyutu visited his boss, President Daniel Toroitich arap Moi, at State House to ask for permission to leave the country for a holiday. He was going to Dubai. The permission was granted because anyway, nothing much usually happened during the festive season. And so Kanyutu jetted out of the country. And then you know what happened on Boxing Day. That very same month, that very same year, on December 26, 1991, from Mombasa, Costa Rica, some people call it, while holidaying, Emilio Stanley Moi Kibaki called a press conference that shook Kenya. Not in his usual suit, yeah, but wearing one of those flowery shirts people wear at the coast when they're on holiday, announced that he had left Kano and had in fact formed his own political party called Democratic Party, DP. Na kuambia kulikuwa kubaya. Immediately, and I mean immediately, the news editor at KTN, who aired that press conference live, was fired. Instructions from State House: you either shut this station down or she is fired. And when Kanyutu came back from Dubai, when Kanyutu came back from Dubai, my friends, hey, imagine, I even have information on that telephone conversation that fired James Kanyutu on the spot. I unsuccessfully tried to look for it amongst my things, before I came in for this recording, but at least I can remember snippets here and there. So you think because you went to the same school as Mwai Kibaki, and because you're both Kikuyus, you can betray me like this? Eh? Of course, Moi had started the call without any greetings, as follows. Why did you not tell me that Kibaki was leaving Kano? Why? Now, staying on point, Moi understood what we're talking about today very well. He understood about relationships and how relationships evolve and how people who know each other, anything can happen. Yeah? And you end up being betrayed very badly. However, in this particular case, Moi was wrong, and time proved Kanyotu correct. The words that Kanyotu spoke at that meeting that Moi rubbished, and others wondered what had happened to Kanyotu, whether he needed to be taken to Mathare or for some kind of mental checkup, those words stood the test of time. Because in my opinion, and in the opinion of many respected analysts, that single move saved Kano. That is the most important move, the most important event that saved Kano and Moi in 1992. Kibaki joining the opposition. Because shortly after that, the opposition was never ever again united. It quickly split into Ford Asili, Ford Kenya, and DP, Democratic Party of Mwai Kibaki. Of course, the intelligence community had to add one thing, one stroke, yeah, when they bumped off a man called Masinde Muliro, a real unsung hero of the country called Kenya, and the only man at that time who, had he lived, was capable of holding the opposition together united, which would have completely finished Kano. Rigging or no rigging, Moi would not have survived a united Ford. Okay? Guys, always keep your friends close, but keep your enemies even closer. And pay very special attention to the relationship between your enemies and your friends, past, present, and future. Oh, that is so terribly important. Now, coming back to the local political scene, currently, there are some very strange bedfellows in play. Very strange. Now, ordinarily, I don't like giving too much detail about the way I work, the way I gather information, how I operate, for obvious reasons. But today, I have been forced to do exactly that by giving you the following very important information so that we all understand. Information can be highly sensitive, and yet when you get that information from Kumekucha Chris, you wonder, no, this information is not sensitive. What is Chris doing here? There is nothing sensitive about this information. But that information can be highly sensitive because of how I got it. Okay? How I came across that information can be the component in that information, yeah, which you're not aware of, but I'm aware of, and others are also aware of, can be the component in the whole mix that makes it highly sensitive. Let me give you a quick example. Now, in the days of Moi, I received a lot of inside classified information of what was happening. Bang, inside State House. Very accurate, very current. But you see, in those days, I was not interested in analyzing local politics. It bored me. But of course, most of this information I received was super fascinating. Of course, at the time, I had no idea that I was being prepared for a future very important mission. In fact, if you had come to me at that time and told me, you're going to be a political analyst, Kenyan politics, I would have told you straight in the face, go tell that to the birds. Me? Local politics? Never. Never ever. It will never happen. Anyway, here's the important point. And I need to ask you a question. What do you think would have happened to the person who was giving me this information had I gone public with that information somewhere? Yeah, even a small publication somewhere. What do you think would have happened to that person? Angemalizwa. I think that is obvious. You see, at that time, my wife was a very close friend to the wife of this man. And they used to visit very frequently. And you see, this was a lonely man because of the nature of his work. He never had a chance to talk about anything. He never had a chance to talk about these things outside there. But in our space, he felt safe. Kwa hivyo aliropokwa kuropokwa and gave me some crazy information. Supposing in those days I had the channel and I released that information on the channel, on the public channel, what do you think would have happened to that poor man? And so please understand me when I tell you information is sensitive. I am serious. I know what I'm talking about. And this information in my very latest highly sensitive special report of who is talking to who, very unexpected, unimaginable bedfellows. This information is sensitive. Please understand. And please forgive me. Because due to that information I've just given you, my target for this information has to be very few people. Now you can see details on your screens right now. For only Kenya shillings 4,999, you will be able to get this information. Of course, a much cheaper option is to get the Kumekucha Golden Key, which gives you access to all Kumekucha information, all sensitive Kumekucha information, and even non-political information. Okay? Again, you can see the details on your screens right now. For only Kenya shillings 6,444. You will not only be able to get this very latest, red-hot special report, you'll also have access to all our past highly sensitive special reports and even future ones, and even weekly intelligence briefings. And so if you're in a position to, please act quickly. Yeah, use the details you see on your screens right now and obtain this golden key, and you never need to worry again about paying for any information or any special report on this channel. And of course, I look forward to the ideal situation where this membership will be closed. That is, will not be accepting any more new members, because naturally that is the safest arrangement. Yeah, nimekuwa nikijaribu kujipanga na bado najipanga, and so it is a good idea if you're able to get that golden key, because you never know how close in the future I'll be in that position where I can close this membership and the membership stays stagnant. Yeah, that will be safest for me and also safest for my informants. Friends, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies even closer, especially because of the relationship between your enemies and those close to you, past, present, and future. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.